Pixel, get out now. All right. Welcome. I hope everybody is doing well. I am doing fine. Thank you for asking. And today we're going to talk about something that we've talked about before, but we're going to talk about when bullying and how bullying becomes normalized. And of course, that is a process of that happens. Can you excuse me for 1 second? Sorry about that. It always seems like whenever I'm doing something, the cat has to get into something. So anyway, we're going to talk about how bullying becomes normal and normalized into your workplace. And this is something that I often come back and revisit because I think it's so important. And one of the main reasons is because we don't think that bullying is a complex problem. How we view bullying in and of itself is problematic. So we view bullying as being something that isn't a big deal. We think that it's an issue between two people. Our lens, oftentimes, when it comes to bullying, is one of, well, first off, it's flawed how we look at bullying. We tend to view it as an interpersonal issue between me and my bully. So we view it from a conflict framework. We view oftentimes workplace bullying as conflict, and when we treat it like conflict, it actually makes things worse. And how bullying becomes normal is that over time, bullying embeds itself into the organizational culture. So let's break it down. Let me try to break that down a little bit. So first off, bullying happens because the organizational culture allows it to happen. And what I mean by that, again, your bully can be your boss. We know oftentimes bullies are boss. Oftentimes bullies are not bosses, right? So they're just part of your workplace. So sometimes they're at the same level as you. Sometimes they're below you in the hierarchy. They might be above you in the hierarchy. It can be anybody in your workplace can be a workplace bully. And what happens is when bullying happens, somebody comes into your workplace and they start bullying. They don't just come into your workplace and again, maybe they are, but generally they come in or they're part of your workplace and they sort of test the waters. So they start to mistreat somebody, and when there's no reaction, then that gives them the green light, and then they keep doing it and they up their game. So eventually it starts that way. And what happens then is it just doesn't stay between the bully and you. It's because the organizational culture tolerates it. And so when people don't say anything to the bully or say, wow, I don't know that I think, Bob, I don't think you should really be yelling at Jan like that. I find it to be inappropriate and it's offensive. When you just look away or you don't say anything, Bob is given the green light and they keep doing that and they'll keep pushing the line. And so what happens then behind the scenes is the group dynamics change, right? And you become immune to the bullying, So the more things that Bob does and the more often it happens, the less likely you are to say something because you develop a tolerance for what is happening. Okay? And so And so because it includes everybody in the organization, it isn't interpersonal conflict between you and your bully. Lots of times, and this is something that victims often say, that, you know, they're being bullied because it's something about them, right? It's something about me that the bully didn't like. I reported them, okay? And so then they started bullying me. If you look at things logically, the bullying started before you reported, right? And so it isn't because you reported, they were bullying you. That's why you reported them. And so personally, I don't buy into this idea that somehow, you know, victims of workplace bullying are better workers and that there's something about them that sets them apart. And the reason I have such a problem with that is because when I went into these workplaces that were dysfunctional, they were dysfunctional before I got there, and I joined the dysfunction, all right, because bullying had become normalized. People had developed an immunity to it, and they didn't speak up or say anything, and it was part of everyday work. I joined the dysfunction and then became, you know, someone who was bullied. It wasn't the opposite. And I don't like the idea of saying or even thinking about that my authentic self, that there's something about my authentic self that gives the green light to an organization and a bully and an organizational culture to allow me to be abused. And the other thing I think is when we think about that, what does somebody have to do really to deserve bullying? And there's nothing you could do. I could scream at the top of my lungs in the middle of the boardroom and do a little dance and throw sugar cookies at people, and that still would not be enough for me to deserve to be bullied, okay? And that, in my opinion, is victim blaming. And so we victim blame to try to normalize what's happening and to put the responsibility on, again, two people, you and the bully, when it's significantly different. But when Bob is bullying, okay, and Bob's yelling, the more that happens and it's not corrected or Bob's not held accountable, we then develop an immunity to it. So if you think about, if you're the person being bullied or you're a bystander, if you think about the first meeting or the first time you were exposed to bullying, it kind of makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, and it throws you off. It's off-putting, and you don't know exactly what's happening. And so you look to other people to say something. You look around at the colleagues who've either been there for a while, who are, you know, senior people, to say something. And when they don't, that also is off-putting. And so when you're, you know, kind of your more tenured faculty or your tenured, you know, administrators or whoever's in your organization that has been there longer, when they see the bullying and don't say anything, then oftentimes newer people in the organizations will replicate that behavior. So they've developed an immunity to it. And bullying becomes normal when it's done over and over and over and over and over, and nobody intervenes, or nobody says to the bully, stop doing that, or let me hold you accountable. Or our mission statement says that we value people, and that includes the people who are working in our organization. And one of the ways it becomes normal is when we treat it like conflict, okay? And bullying is not conflict. Okay, and conflict is not bullying. It's not an interpersonal issue. Conflict is an interpersonal issue between me and somebody at work. Okay, I might be upset about, I think money should be spent in our budget on, you know, furniture for the offices. Somebody else thinks that the budget money ought to be spent on the parking lot, and we have a disagreement or conflict about that particular issue. Generally in conflict, there's a starting point, something that sort of lit the fuse, the spark that gets people upset at one another. And conflict within organizations can spread to other people, right? So maybe team A wants the parking lot and team B wants, new furniture, and that kind of gets people angry, okay? But when you go and talk to team B or team A, that doesn't escalate things because you're talking specifically about the budget money and where it should be spent on, and you're going to make your case and they're going to make their case. It's centered around the issue with conflict. And if you use things like reporting, right, and you report somebody from team A to HR, that doesn't increase the conflict, it decreases it, right? It gets to the core of the issue, which is, this side wants this and this side wants that. Let's negotiate and figure out a way that we can deal with the budget so that, maybe we can, do a little bit with the parking and we can buy everybody a new chair, and then it's a win-win situation. So negotiating or using things like mediation to negotiate a side works to stop the conflict. And when you resolve it in a healthy way, your team actually develops more trust. Your group becomes more cohesive, okay? But when you treat bullying like conflict, it explodes, okay? So let's figure out why that is. Why, when we treat bullying like conflict, it makes it worse, okay? So first off, let's address the elephant in the room, which is, why do organizations treat why do organizations treat bullying like conflict, okay? It's because they're trying to figure out what to do, and they have no other point of reference other than conflict. So most organizations, when it looks at conflict, they have some sort of policy to talk about it, right? There's step 1, go talk to the person. Step 2, go talk to their supervisor. Step 3, right? HR. They have these nicely outlined steps of how you resolve it. So they use what they're comfortable with, and that's generally conflict resolution. They don't know what else to do about it, okay? And so when you're trying to treat bullying like conflict, it explodes because it's not the same thing. Conflict is an interpersonal issue between me and a few of my colleagues. Bullying is a systematic, complex problem that infects the organization. It changes the power dynamics. It changes the group dynamics, right? So let's go back to say that I have an issue with Bob because Bob is bullying me, and I use conflict resolution, okay? Let's say Bob is my colleague, so we're on the same level, so we're even, quote unquote, equal in the power field. We're on the same rung in the hierarchy, okay? But the problem is that Bob has a lot of power because of how the bullying has become normalized, how it's become everyday work. He's been reporting to HR, and he's got a pipeline to HR. He's got a pipeline to my supervisor. So he has all of this power behind the scenes that is not reflected in the hierarchy chain of command. And so the power differentiation, even if you are on the same level as somebody who is bullying you, it's not the same because the bully has consolidated power behind the scenes. They have a network that they're working with. And so then Bob gets upset that I've reported him. He's got all these bystanders and minions in the organization that he sends after me. And the person of HR or the supervisor already is in Bob's pocket, and they believe whatever Bob says. And so the system is then rigged against you. And so dealing with conflict and dealing with bullying are two very different things. And then what happens when you report, or even you try mediation, which does not work because there's not equitability, when it comes to power, those things blow up and you end up bullying, getting bullied more. But organizations don't know what else to do. Okay. And one of the things when we look at human resources, who often takes the rap, and sometimes that's rightly so, for not dealing with bullying, is one of the things that you have to remember is that HR is the go-to person for everybody, including your bully. So it's very likely that when you look at HR and the people in that office, they're trained in conflict resolution. They have no idea how bullying is operating. So they're already starting 20 feet behind the starting gate because they're not up to date on what workplace bullying is. And so they don't know that they're being manipulated by Bob. They're just grateful Bob is coming to them telling you about what a terrible worker I am. They don't go out and look at facts because they don't have to do that when there's generally a problem with conflict. Okay, they trust the people who are coming into their office, which is a huge mistake, frankly, if you want my 2 cents on that when it comes to HR. Stop taking people's word. Go out and figure out stuff yourself. And secondly is, if Bob is bullying me, it isn't just a me thing. Bob's probably bullying HR, right? And if it's a big enough organization, like some of the universities that I was in, where there were multiple departments that were had bullying, HR was probably being bullied by several other people. Okay, and they just don't know what to do. So they use what they have on the books, and generally that's conflict resolution, which actually makes their job harder. It makes the environment worse, but they're using what they have available. They don't know what else to do. And so dealing with conflict is not the same as dealing with bullying. And you can also see that we use conflict and we treat bullying the same way as an interpersonal issue, again, between two people. Again, if you haven't, I don't like the bully target paradigm, that framework, because it excuses everybody else in the organization and it just focuses on two people, Bob and Jan, right? The bully and the person who's being bullied. And bullying is an organizational problem. It's not a two-people problem, okay? Because of how Bob and your bully has manipulated and consolidated power behind the scenes. It's much more complicated. And it requires a systematic solution. And conflict doesn't. Because when you do mediation or you report generally, or you even go talk to the person, generally those things work it out. And it's detrimental because what people haven't gotten on board with is because if you look at, and of course I have because I'm curious, to see what organizations and associations are telling people who are being bullied, unions and etc. Most of the places where there's a lot of bullying don't have any information about bullying on their website. And if they do, right, it's basically what I just said to you makes things worse. They report, go talk to the person, go up the chain of command, have a zero tolerance policy, right? And I'm not a fan of any of those things when it comes to bullying because reporting makes it worse. You can do it more effectively, but you have to have a strategy, right? I'm not a fan of zero tolerance policies because the very system that's dysfunctional is going to say that you're the problem, not the bully. And the bully has everybody in the organizations behind them. So zero tolerance policies are about getting rid of the person who's being bullied, not the person who's doing the bullying. And if you have bully culture and it's infected in your organization, it doesn't make one bit of difference. If you get rid of that one person, somebody's going to roll over and you're going to get rid of Bob one day and Betty's going to step up to the plate and you're still going to have a problem with bullying. It doesn't solve the issue. And I am a huge fan of helping people learn how to be better professionals. Right? Bob has learned the skills to be a bully, and Bob can unlearn the skills to be a bully. Okay? You have to heal the organizational culture through restorative justice, but Bob can learn how not to bully. And Bob actually and your organization will be better off if you hold Bob accountable, plain and simple. But when you treat bullying like conflict, it just tends to blow up. And the person who gets hurt the worst is your organization and bottom line. So you need to think about another way to do that. So I want to talk to you just about a couple of things, some exciting things coming out. So next week by this time, I'm going to have our course online, Am I Being Bullied at Work, which is a course that you can take if you're not sure what's happening. It'll do two things for you. Answer the question is yes or no, am I being bullied at work? And it'll help you develop some strategies for dealing with whatever it is that you're dealing with. And so that will be released next week, which you can get it on my shop. And also, if you haven't listened to the next episode of Exposing Workplace Bullying, that came out yesterday, and that's the myth of neutrality. So anyway, I hope you're doing well. Thank you so much, and I will see you next week.